Honourable Leanne Dalziel.
Mr Chairman, thank you very much for the opportunity to enter into the debate. I think one of the most important debates that we're having tonight on this bill. The two clauses that it represents. Mr Chairman, the reason that I rise to call on this debate, on this aspect, this Part 3, is because it really does raise the question that hasn't yet had an answer from the member and the chair. Because what Clause 26 says is nothing in this Act exempts Westpac Banking Corporation or Westpac New Zealand from the provisions of any enactment relating to banks or banking. Now that's an extremely wide clause, one would assume, but actually what about its application to the rules around financial advisors? Because of course financial advisors is covered by a completely different regime which is not literally related to banks. And so I wonder whether this clause is sufficient to, in fact, encapsulate the requirements of an enactment which might pertain to banks under certain circumstances if they avail themselves of that particular piece of legislation that they're not required to, and be sort of rather narrow if you look at it this way, in terms of this clause which says the provisions of any enactment relating to banks and banking. So does the question that I raised in the previous part of the debate, does that actually have relevance to this part? You know, the member and the chair didn't answer that question, which is if Westpac Banking Corporation New Zealand was registered in its own right as a qualifying financial entity under the financial advisors legislation, or even if under that provision they had certain members of their staff that were already registered as authorised financial advisors. In actual fact, I think I can answer the second question myself, which is if they are independently registered as authorised financial advisors, then that will transfer over when the amalgamation is retained. But what I want to know is that I personally don't know whether either or indeed both of them are independently registered as qualifying financial entities. And maybe the member could assist in this debate by explaining to us whether either Westpac Banking Corporation, the New Zealand branch, is registered as a qualifying financial entity. In fact, I don't even know whether they can register as a qualifying financial entity if they're just a branch of an overseas-owned banking corporation. That's actually quite an interesting point. I think they probably are able to. And so then the second question is whether Westpac New Zealand is registered as a qualifying financial entity, and I'm going to say that I would assume that they are. And if they both are, does that make a difference in terms of the transfer one to the other? And if only one is, does that make a difference, transfer from one to the other? And I think that it just raises a really serious issue about whether or not this is a matter that is catered for in a clause that specifically refers to the enactment having to relate to banks or banking. Because, of course, as we know, financial advisors do not only exist within banking, within the banking industry. And, of course, a number of financial advisors work for so-called independent financial advisor institutions. Others actually operate independently. Some of them are obviously working for a tied arrangement with a broker kind of arrangement with the insurance industry, or in fact they may be tied to one particular financial institution. So there are whole lots of different areas that are not specific to banks or banking where you can find this qualifying financial entity status, and where you can find people that would be described as authorised financial advisors. So, I mean, it is a genuine question that I'm asking, and it would be really helpful if the member and the chair could advise whether Westpac Banking Corporation, the New Zealand branch thereof, was registered as a qualifying financial entity, and whether Westpac New Zealand was.
Stuart Nash.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My colleague poses some very